Salam. Welcome back to my podcast, The Conversation Piece. I am your host, Akila. Salam. Oh, to be young. I remember my younger years filled with regular teenage angst, crushes, music that you did not have to censor in front of your parents, well, until the late 90s at least, and anxiously awaiting graduation because I would be grown. But today's teenagers have a whole new set of problems to tackle. They live in the era of social media where everything is readily available and instantaneous, and not always fair. I recently had a conversation with a teenager, a highly motivated, educated, and reflective teenager who, during this time, is finding out a lot about herself, and she's starting to see the world for what it has unfortunately become, and she's uncomfortable with the status quo. I'm not going to name her because she wants to remain anonymous, but her voice is still appreciated and valued just the same. This is part one of our conversation.
First thing I wanted to bring up is the Black Lives Matter movement. I agree. I also think that, like Black Lives Matter. In that phrase, nowhere does it say, like, other lives don't matter, you know? And I feel like it really shows the culture of this country when this movement starts popping up and people become aware, and all of a sudden, like, people create their own phrases, like, all lives matter, Black lives don't matter by themselves. And then they'll say, like, not that they don't say it before, but it's, like, becoming more like a counterpoint, I guess. If someone says Black Lives Matter, or someone says, well, Blue Lives Matter. And it kind of just shows this, like, the culture, because it's, like, now that people of color are starting to become more aware of who they are, and it's, like, it's a sense of, like, pride, too, like, we're all together, especially, like, it's not so much, like, it's hidden, like, it's out there, and then yet people have, like, counter arguments to it. Like, how is it that the phrase Black Lives Matter, how is there any, like, but this happens, or, and this, like, how is there any, like, you know, I don't know the word, how is there any, like, ifs, ands, or buts to that sentence? So I feel like it shows a lot. But the movement on its own, I like that it's happening. The awareness, I think, is good for people who look like us, and I like that it's still, like, staying strong. Like, I hope people know that it's not just, like, a moment. It's, like, literally, like, a movement is how I consider it.
Do you find it ironic that in this year, 2020, in which we had to, like, be more still, that it took something like a George Floyd on video to spark people to activism? Because think about it. There's been a lot of people who've died at the hands of not only cops, but people of non-black people before, like Trayvon Martin, you know, a guy who wanted to play cop, but
Yeah.
But again, like you say Black Lives Matter, they turn out something else. They're like, well, what about Chicago? Well, what about Chicago? There are a lot of more underlying issues that are happening in Chicago besides black on black crime. What people fail to realize is that crime is proximity. If I live in a predominantly black neighborhood, the chances of me being harmed or killed by a black person is high. It's the same thing if you live in a predominantly white neighborhood. The chance of you being killed or hurt or harmed by a white person is high. So again, I think people, they try to run away from the truth and say turn it into something else.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a really good point that you brought up. Like, people have made too many excuses during this movement to kind of, in a way, show how maybe black lives don't matter. For example, the first thing they'll bring up is black on black crime. I don't think there's a certain, let's say, white on white crime. No one says that. There's no black on black crime. It's just crime. And so they're using the statistics from, like, let's say, like, mostly black populations. Like, they're like, well, if Black Lives Matter so much, why are black people killing other black people? Like, what the heck? Like, that's such, like, an excuse to try to say why black lives don't matter. And then I'm not, like, you know, I can't speak for others if I'm, like, in a different situation or anything like that. But let's just say, like, places where there's, like, it's more, like, there's more poverty, there's less opportunity and stuff like that, which is a whole different like subject I want to get into too. But in a place like that, you see, like statistics show, people are more likely to commit crimes to get along, to get the money that they need, like to do what they have to do to survive in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, like I'm not speaking for people or like, you know, making reasons or anything like that, but you see like a pattern. It shows, evidence shows. So of course especially in this country as generations, you see people of color are usually given less opportunity. You see majority of the population in these lower income neighborhoods happen to be people of color. And that stems back like so many years though. You cannot just use that as an excuse why their lives don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like if anything, instead of making the question like why is there black on black crime, then think why is it that like why is there a pattern in the first place? Yeah, in law, like in text it says that we're all like equal, and so a lot of people question, well, how in 2020 are like people of color still not treated equally? Even though it says it in text, look at the different lifestyles. And then the thing is, a lot of people who talk about these lower income neighborhoods, who talk about, let's say, like Chicago, like there's a lot of like places with a lot of, let's say, gun violence, just like violence in general. A lot of people who talk on places like that happen to come from privileged backgrounds, and they never did have to experience that struggle or might understand why someone didn't have the opportunities in like educations and careers that they were able to get. So I just feel like there's two different lives in America for sure. I feel like.
During our conversation, the topic of white privilege came up, and it's election year, so you know who came to mind.
And I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions around the definition of like white privilege.
For instance, what do you mean?
Okay, so a lot of people that I've heard talking to, they think there's no such thing as white privilege because their reasons are because I still have to work to provide for my family, I still have to do this. No one said you didn't have to work for it, that you're like literally born into some kind of like kingdom where you don't have to like lift a finger in your life. That's not white privilege. Mm-hmm. White privilege is just that. Let's say like you get into an interaction with the cops or you go to court or like a job or anything. When you show your face, it's just some kind of automatic culture to where you are on like you're given a benefit that people of color don't get. Mm-hmm. Like in court, you see stories of someone that's white, someone that's black, and they have the same like reason they went to court and everything. And you see stories where the black person gets like more time and stuff like that, or they'll get harsher sentences, and the white person's always given the benefit of the doubt. Well, not like always, but usually. Mm-hmm. That's white privilege. It's like you're given the benefit of the doubt. You get the system favors you. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to work and you might not experience struggle. Like that's the difference. And I feel like a lot of people, like white people, if they understand the definition of white privilege more, and they look like inward at some of the advantages that they were maybe given, I feel like that would also help break this blind like vision that they have to other people as well. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of this understanding stems with people reflecting like inward instead of just like generalizing everything. For example, Trump supporters, right? Mm-hmm. They'll fly their flags, Trump 2020, and they're like, but I'm not racist. Right. So they agree with all of his political stuff, right? Let's just say they agree with all his the political stuff he puts out there. But the racist remarks and the stuff that he has said, has done, and stuff like that. So what you're showing me is that you like his policies, but the racist part wasn't enough for you to stop liking this person. Mm-hmm. Wasn't enough for you to stop supporting this person. So it's just like when I see a Trump flag, in my head, as a person of color, in my head, I'm just like, well, they're racist. And it's not that they go around shouting racial slurs every day. Mm. They maybe even have friends of people of like color. But what they're showing me is that because it's not their problem, the race issues aren't enough for them to stop liking that person. So same thing with America. Sure, all these great opportunities that people put out there, but the race issues, the equality issues, just the social just rights and education, all that stuff that's not talked about, it's like that wasn't enough for this country to not be considered great. Like, it truly just, it shows how there's only certain aspects being looked on, but not the truth overall, like, within. It takes more than just jobs to make a country great, though. Yeah, this country is literally for
wealthy white men.
White men, yeah.
Yeah.
And from the start, though, there's a whole lot of groups that are affected by just like the history of America. Let's start with like Native Americans and stuff like that. Okay, education. Oh my gosh, the education system sucks. You learn that, you know, Christopher Columbus was the first to find this country, whatever. But they don't talk about the slaughtering of Native Americans and just how people were killed so that they can just colonize the land, pretty much. They don't talk about how, like, the forced labor, the tiny bit, 1% that they talk about slavery in school is nothing compared to what truly happened. And I feel like a lot of that education is, like, needed for people to understand, like, the truth and the history of this country from the start.
Well, they're starting, what you're noticing with the history books, they're starting to whitewash the history. They don't want to talk about slavery. They don't want to talk about the extermination of Native Americans. And first of all, how do you find a country and there's people already living on it? You're a visitor. How do you find a country? Yeah. That's like me walking into someone's house and say, "Oh, look what I discovered. My name's not on the deed." You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's people, like a colonizing nature. You still see it to this day, too.
I asked her how she was coping during this time of quarantine, and her answer was illuminating. So how have you been coping? How have you been coping during this COVID period?
Honestly, okay, I'm not gonna lie. I liked quarantine because I just loved just not doing anything. But that's coming from somebody who didn't work at that time. Like, I didn't really have like too many worries as like the typical like adult around that time frame. So like that's coming from like just me and my little teenage world. Though, like I love that, and I'm big on just like hygiene and like cleaning down stuff and washing hands. So I love that the fact that an outcome of this pandemic is like people are actually enforcing like basic sanitizing like procedures in places. It's crazy. It took a whole pandemic with a virus for people to do basic stuff like wash their hands more or wipe down tables and desks and handles, and like it shows. I don't know. I love this outcome though. Like people are actually becoming cleaner. And I don't know, but I mean, I was cautious because I know, like, my family and stuff. Let's say I went out with my friends, because there's people I saw like, in my age group, like, they never stopped partying, they never stopped doing this and that. So, I don't know. I was careful though, because I know that I could always bring it home to like my family and stuff like that. So we just stayed home for the most part. But it was annoying to see those who were a bit less careful and made things like prolong way more than they should have been if they just, you know, followed rules. But there's a sense of entitlement there. But since the beginning of what I call like this quarantine, I guess, like I had a lot of time to like do more research and just like try to educate myself a lot more. And I feel like from the beginning of the year to now, I feel like a whole different person. And it's not that I've changed like all those aspects individually. It's just like once I started to really understand who I was, it fell into place. And like now it's like my mentality is so much like different, but it makes a big difference. Like imagine if so many more people did that. Oof,
yeah,
unstoppable.
Well, that was part 1 of our conversation. Stay tuned in for part 2, coming soon, inshallah. I want to thank my young guest for her outlook and the time she took to talk with me and lending her voice. Perhaps one day soon, the world will come to know your name.
Soon there will no longer be pollution. Shining brighter than all the diamonds. There will be a different horizon. One day we will all come to Zion. Strong as a lion, we can be silenced. No, there's a busy answer to all of this. Even in a hateful heart it exists. Why can't we just look at the lockdown? It's been too long, yeah. We gotta reunite, yeah.
I want to thank you all for listening and allowing me into your space. I hope you will join me again. Until next time, remember, when you start a conversation, start it with peace. Assalamu alaikum.